Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed insists his country will not descend into chaos. That's despite reports of heavy casualties in fighting between the military and regional forces in Ethiopia's Tigray region, that's in the north of the country, near the border to Eritrea. Now, Ethiopia's federal government launched the offensive against forces of the Tigray People's Liberation Front last Wednesday, blaming them for an attack on a military base. Now, the TPLF party dominated Ethiopian politics for decades. That was until Abiy Ahmed came into office in 2018. Since then, the Tigray leadership has claimed the federal government is unfairly targeting their ethnic group in corruption crackdowns. For his part, Abiy accuses the TPLF of attempting to destabilize the country.
Intent on perpetuating a culture of impunity and restoring the undue privilege they enjoyed in the past. The TPLF old guards have continuously mounted both covert and overt attempts to undermine the people of Ethiopia and our new administration.
Now, the Tigray leadership have promised to continue fighting until the federal government agrees to negotiate. But members of parliament in Addis Ababa say they do not recognize the TPLF as a legitimate administration and have voted to abolish the state government. For more on this, I'm joined by William Davidson. He's a senior analyst for Ethiopia at the Crisis Group. He joins me from Addis. Welcome, William. What more do we know about the military operation underway in Tigray?
Well, we know that the fighting is concentrated in West Tigray. That's where the federal forces primarily entered from Amhara region. So there's some sort of active engagement in West Tigray. Reports of fairly significant casualties coming into Amhara health clinics, mostly of federal troops. But it may well be the case that Tigrayan casualties are being treated in Tigray, and there was very limited information coming out of Tigray because of the communications blackout. Other than that, no reported recent new active engagements, but there were the airstrikes at military targets around Mekelle, the capital of Tigray, a couple of days ago.
William, what's the feeling around whether or not regional leaders in Tigray have left Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed no choice but to send the military in?
Well, that's obviously the view from the federal government and supporters of the military intervention. Very much the narrative is that Tigrayan forces attacked a military base and also in the west of Tigray and also around Mekelle, the regional capital. And they say that's just simply unacceptable. But I think the key point to understand here is that there is this communications blackout in Tigray. It's been very hard to verify information, and also there is a long political build-up to this conflict where there is possibility on both sides to have taken measures to avoid a path of conflict. That didn't occur. We ended up in a situation where the regional and federal governments called each other unlawful, and that's what led to the conflict.
And how close does this conflict bring Ethiopia to a civil war?
Well, I think that depends on your definition of civil war. Again, the federal government is talking about this as a sort of limited law enforcement operation simply to remove the TPLF leadership, the leadership of Tigray region. But the problem, of course, is that regional leadership is in command of a powerful regional security apparatus. Elements of the federal military in Tigray seem to have sided with the Tigray government, or at least are not supporting the federal intervention. So that means that we actually have a very serious and potentially sustained clash. So it's not a full-blown civil war. It's certainly not crossing anything like the whole of Ethiopia, but it is a very serious clash between the federal government and what is a relatively well-armed regional government. And some people would obviously classify that as a civil war in and of itself.
Right. And could this be resolved diplomatically? If so, what kind of compromises would need to be made?
Well, of course, there is always hope that these things can be solved diplomatically, and there are certainly efforts both within Ethiopia and outside to encourage the parties to come to the negotiating table. And we know with certain preconditions, that's something which the Tigrayan leadership is willing to do. The problem is that these parties were formerly part of the same ruling coalition. And then since 2018, they have gradually grown into bitter opponents, ending up with this very stark constitutional debate over the legitimacy of Tigray running its own regional election. And now they have entered a conflict phase. So at the moment, there is none of the warring parties are really pursuing a negotiated solution. The first step, I think, to do so would be some sort of immediate unconditional ceasefire. Then the parties would have to agree that they are at least legitimate enough authorities to talk to each other. Because at the moment, they are simply treating each other as enemy combatants. So we need to get past that stage to get some sort of talks going. At the moment, it doesn't look likely, but who knows? If the conflict gets protracted, hopefully both sides will start looking more seriously at the prospects of dialogue, and the international community and the regional leaders can help put pressure on the parties to do that.
All right, that's Crisis Group's William Davidson in Addis Ababa. Thank you, William.